today's session is, we're hosting Erik Passoja. Just a reminder to the team. So Erik, he's been leading a lot of great work as part of the C2PA and the COG ecosystem. We've worked in multiple working groups, advancing specifications within the C2PA ecosystem, as well as, he's leading currently the consent task force, part of the COG. So COG is the Creators Assertions Working Group. Maybe with that and just being cautious of time, I think, Erik, please feel free to introduce yourself, and let's take it from there.
Hey, everybody. It's really great to be talking to a bunch of fellow nerds and hopefully fellow neurodivergents. You guys are very lucky. I have my second cup of coffee of the day, which is always my best mood. Like most of you, I'm a professional actor. I work as the deputy director of the FBI and NCIS. I just did voices for How to Train Your Dragon. And I just appeared on The Rookie. And I got started in this in 2014. I'm going to share my screen with you so you have sort of an idea. Do you guys see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Perfect. In 2014, I was hired. I've done 17 major video games, including a couple Star Wars, Call of Duty, as you can see here, Red Dead Redemption 2, Starfield. And in 2014, I did performance capture for Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. And I was in the interstitials. I played a Belgian geneticist named Doc. I worked with Kevin Spacey. No, he didn't hit on me. I'd be a lot richer. I played his henchman. And so during the interstitials between the violence, they play our reels. And 6 months later, the game came out. A friend called and said, "Hey, Erik, my son just shot you." I said, "What?" Turns out they'd taken my face and put it on a PvP player. So now people are playing me shooting at your kids. Now, if you knew me, that's not okay. That's not what I signed up for. But I did sign a contract that is no longer legal. They made over $1 billion off the game. They did not get my consent. So it was immoral, unethical, and completely legal, and technically part of the same project. And they made more money than Taylor Swift's 1989, Disney's Frozen, and Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy combined that year. It was the biggest entertainment opening of the year. And I got my session fee. Now, no big harms. But when we went on strike in 2023, the famous strike that froze the movie business for a while, I realized, oh my gosh, we are the canaries in the coal mine of digital identity. You take away a carpenter's voice, they can still build. You take away a voice actor's voice, they'll never work again. And I thought about the 22-year-old who has a voice like Janice and Whitney, who shouldn't get it stolen from her for $50K. Now, that'll seem like a lot of money at the time, but she should be making Adele money. And then I started diving into what was really going on with digital identity at the dawn of artificial intelligence. And now I call it the morning of artificial intelligence because the sun has definitely come up. And so today, we're really going to address how it affects the populace at large, how that affects legislation. And in turn, we're going to edge into the metaverse and see how all these parts mix together. I became co-chair of the SAG-AFTRA LA New Tech Committee. We put out 30 proposals in 2024, 10 on AI digital identity. I was part of the LA Gap, testified in Sacramento twice in front of the AI Labor Board. I have 2 non-provisional and 13 provisional patents. I authored a letter to Governor Newsom for AI safety. And I'm CEO and founder of ProofGen. And it all goes down to this. If your doctor calls you to double up on your medication, but it's not your doctor, if you call your school to pick up your kids and your school releases them, but it's not you, President Biden in January 2024 was deepfaked in a robocall in New Hampshire. It took him 32 days to catch the culprit. Since then, there have been deepfakes of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Susie Wiles, our White House Chief of Staff, Amy Klobuchar, who actually sponsored the No Fakes Act, AOC. Scammers stole $25 million appearing as a CFO of a Hong Kong company. There have been deepfakes of children, non-consensual, explicit images of celebrities, including Taylor Swift. It reached millions of people before anyone could stop them. And nowadays, you just need 3 seconds of voice and one picture to actually have something that fairly looks like you. Just so you get the extent of the concern, the FBI released a PSA in December of 2024 saying that generative artificial intelligence fraud is spiking. Parents are getting calls from deepfakes of their children. A mom is not recognizing her kid's voice. So if we wonder if computers have passed the Turing test, in a sense, they have. So we're in the morning of AI. Now, when we go to show business, there have been some digital identity lawsuits over the last couple of years. So I'm going to make it concrete with 2 real cases. The first one's from the Top Gun Maverick movie, an actor named Barry Tubb. He sued over his own image. He was in the first one. There was a photograph of him used in the film without permission. The camera didn't linger on it long, but it was sitting on the background on a wall, an asset that nobody had cleared. That's going to be part of the focus of this conversation. One image, unaccounted for, it became a lawsuit on a $1 billion movie. So compliance may want to ask how many uncleared assets are sitting in our pipelines right now. The next one is more recent. It's even more on the nose. It's a dispute over how a character was built for a major film franchise. So there's a journey of one asset. A teenage actor, she does a breakout role. Press photo of her face runs in the LA Times. She's about 14 years old. Years later, Jim Cameron is designing a Neytiri for Avatar, and according to the lawsuit, zeroes in on that image, telling his team to use her lower face as the anchor for the lead character in the movie. Movies, merch, theme parks for decades. She has no idea, the actress has no idea until a viral clip surfaces from an art gallery talk, and Cameron is standing in front of the concept art, names her and says that Neytiri's face came from a newspaper photo of Qorianka Kilcher, the actress. Only then does she realize that her teenage features were quietly turned into a $1 billion avatar without her consent. So here's the question for the pipeline. At which step in that journey did anyone check whether the person at the start still consented? Well, the answer is nowhere. Once it comes out, everyone assumes it's cleared. Once the assets started moving, then the person drops out of the story, and it was assumed that she consented. This is a potential problem that could happen at enormous scale with avatars. And that happened in the movie Avatar. Just realize that. That's kind of wild. The point is, this is a lawsuit against many, many companies, and obviously nobody wants the liability or the bad press. So let's take a step back and understand that the way we trust content has changed twice over history. It's about to change a third time. In the analog era, we trusted the object. Photograph was physical, right? It was tied to the moment it was taken. Then, of course, this is Tilly and her person, right? It's a Polaroid, which, by the way, is kind of the second gen of photography, isn't it? So then came the digital era, and we trusted the file, the bits, the metadata, the forensics. You could open a file and study its history. Now we're entering a third area, and it's different in a way that matters enormously. See, with AI, you can't trust anything about the artifact itself. The machine does not copy a file. It learns what a thing is as identity, a set of patterns, a face, a smile, hair, eyes. It generates a brand new version from scratch. There's no original file to examine. All that's left is identity. And if you look at the top right, it just created a whole bunch of things in seconds from the identity of Tilly and her person. So when I can describe a person in words and get their face back out, the artifact cannot be the thing you trust. In fact, I call that the data frontier. No watermark or hardbound header will actually survive a neural engine. It has to be put back on. And that one idea is the key thing to everything else I'm going to say, because you cannot dust a photocopy for fingerprints, right? So 3 legal currents are changing right now into the law. Over the last 18 months, the US, the EU, and Asia, three kinds of laws converged at the same time. The first one on the left says you have to disclose when something was made by AI. The second says you have to preserve a record of where the content came from. Provenance, the birth certificate of a digital object, digital asset, one might call it. The third says you have to protect a person's identity and get their consent before you use it. Three currents coming out in one wave. We're going to go over these bills. We're not going to go over the Utah and Elvis Act and the New York Stop Deepfakes Act, but just note they're very, very in line with what's happening with California, and we're going to go deeply into California legislation. So just note, let me actually just go back for a second. Every one of these laws assumes that there's a verifiable record that already exists, a record of origin, and consent that travels with the content. These laws, they demand a record. As by the way, especially if you're doing this at machine speed. If we're going to ask, did Tom Hanks consent to this commercial? We could call somebody who runs a warehouse the size of the one at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they can go look for that consent piece of paper. But at machine speed, it needs to be machine readable. And there's barely any enforcement. And note, things are happening faster and at scale. And that's the whole point. Because the only enforcement that scales is not a lawsuit after the fact, it's the record itself writing on or next to the asset, check before anything happens. And I know that you guys have been working on a Metaverse Universal Manifest, which is very interesting to me. Okay, it needs to be checked ideally before anything happens. I actually wrote 3 bills, and one of them is that we need cooperative players. We need everything to just check for provenance and consent, or someone will deepfake the president or continue doing CSAM. If there is actually a mark on it and it is readable, it means it hasn't gone through generative AI unless it's been put on later. So here's an important point, and I want to be fair about it. None of these laws mention 3D avatars, not one. They were written thinking about deep fake videos and fake photographs, flat media. And most of what you build is original characters that actually don't resemble a real person, right? That avatar is not of a real person. I generated it in AI, actually. So it's what we at SAG-AFTRA would call a synthetic performer. It's a human, but it's not recognizable to anyone on the planet. It may look like someone, but it's not derived from that person's digital identity. It's an amalgam. So you prompt for a warrior with white war paint, you get that face that's nobody. The identity laws, they leave that alone. So I'm not going to tell you otherwise. But 2 things move you inside the law in the metaverse. First, if a generative engine made it, the provenance laws switch on, real person or not. Second, and this is one you can't control, the moment a real identifiable person is in the asset, the identities laws switch on no matter what tool made it. And if you read the definitions, a deepfake is defined as something that resembles a real identifiable person. They can also be called a digital replica. In the entertainment business, there are two kinds. There's an employment-based digital replica. You take my picture, record my voice, you scan me in a truck. That's an employment-based because I was hired already. Or an independently created digital replica, ICDR. I give you my voice pattern and you use it. You show me the script, I consent, you go make the commercial and I sip Mai Tais in Hawaii. That hasn't happened yet, but I'm looking forward to that. So a digital replica is a vinyl, voice, image, name, likeness by law. I would add movement and biometrics. There is a real conversation about the stunt people, especially in interactive games. If you are a wushu master, there are 5 people who could probably do anything near to what you do. That movement needs to be protected. If you take a cup and you put it on a shelf, anyone can do that, and that's not a distinguishing mannerism of movement. So those are conversations that are still happening behind closed doors. But inscribed in law in many states and soon federally with the No Fakes Act, I call it vinyl, voice, image, name, likeness. It will become a property law, and we'll discuss that. A game character is covered. An avatar is covered. A digital double is covered. So let me take you through the ones that matter most, starting in California. SB 942, the AI Transparency Act. It's signed. It kicks in on August 2nd. Simultaneously, actually, with the EU laws, and we'll discuss them. This bill, the next one I'm going to show you, we're actually due on January 1st. And so many companies were like, we don't know what we're going to do. And the EU laws kick in on August 2nd. So everyone agreed August 2nd. Here's what this one does in plain terms. Signed by Newsom in September of 2024. If you are a large generative AI provider and your tool makes images, video, or audio, you have to embed a permanent machine readable signal into that content, saying it was made or altered by AI by your system at that time. And you have to give the public a free tool to check for it. One thing that matters for you, it covers image, video, and audio, not text. So a chatbot's words, they're not covered, but the moment your tool takes a picture or voice, it is. And note, this particular bill addresses generative AI companies that have over 1 million monthly users. So that would cover OpenAI, of course, Google, Adobe. They have Firefly, Sona, 11 Labs, etc. And by the way, I'll share this slideshow with you. You'll be able to look through everything. Just so you know, if you're a covered provider and your users are generating, for example, images without proper provenance per SB 942, the provider, i.e., for example, Adobe pays $5,000 per day per violation. Imagine how many users they have and how challenging that would be, which makes it no surprise that Adobe is one of the founders of the Content Authenticity Initiative. So here's what it is. Mandate a label, provide a reader. Simple as that. The California model is putting a durable label on AI content and giving people a way to read it. That's the whole idea. One, you include a hidden disclosure, a latent disclosure. It's mandatory. Two, and this is the key phrase, it has to be permanent and extraordinarily difficult to remove. It has to survive normal workflows. A label you can strip with one export where you forgot to export the provenance, it doesn't count. Three, the consequent, which I told you about. And if you use the tool of a covered provider, i.e. in your workflow, you use Adobe Photoshop to take an item that has AI provenance on it and put it on a 3D asset, and it's disabled, Adobe has to cut you off within 96 hours. The label itself is not complicated. At a minimum, it carries 4 things. Who made it, which system and version, when, and a unique identifier. That's the floor. Simple to state. The hard part, as you're going to see in a minute, is making that label survive. So why does this law exist? 3 reasons, and then there's the actual real reason underneath it. The reason, and I've spoken with people who wrote the bill, is public safety. We all need to know it's real, protecting people, especially from deepfakes, and protecting creative work, individuals and studios alike. The real reason underneath it is child pornography. Obviously, it's a serious issue right now with generative AI. And in fact, the only AI bill to pass US Congress last year was indeed the Take It Down Act, pushed forward by Ted Cruz and practically stood upon by Melania Trump. It's the one law nobody can deny. Nobody's going to say they're against anti-pornography laws. So it went through. And AG Bonta last August issued a press release and sent letters to the top 12 AI companies and said, if there are sexually inappropriate interactions between AI chatbots and children, or you put out child pornography, or you have users who pump it out, we are coming after you. So CSAM is a real reason, a real powerful political reason these bills are going through, just FYI. So it's way bigger than entertainment, 3D, news, advertising, and music. And we tend to forget that. So here's the trap. At the end of this bill, there's a passage right at the end, and I'm going to read it out loud. Does not apply to any product, service, internet website, or application that provides exclusively non-user generated video game, TV, streaming, movie, or interactive experiences. But note those words, non-user generated. The second a user can make or upload anything, a custom character, a skin, a mod, a build mode, the exemption is gone for the entire product, not just the user part of it, all of it. And a Metaverse platform runs on user creation. So for you, that exemption was never really there. The moment a user creates, you are a covered provider on the clock. By SB 942, if you have over 1 million monthly users, but we're going to address that point directly in a new bill. No company policy is going to fix that because the law wants an actual technical thing, record on asset, latent disclosure at the minimum. And one thing I neglected to mention is the option to make it a manifest disclosure. And if you go on LinkedIn every once in a while, you'll see a little C on the top left corner, a little icon of an image. You can actually click on it because that person made the disclosure manifest to see the content credentials of that image and where it came from. So let's go on to AB 853. This is the sibling, the second part of the AI Transparency Act. I testified for this one in Sacramento last year. Assemblymember Buffy Wicks. It extends the transparency rules. One, if you are a large platform serving content, you have to detect that provenance signal. You have to keep it intact and you have to show it. You can't knowingly strip it off. Two, new cameras and phones, microphones sold in California will have to offer the people the option to attach provenance the moment they record. So for clarity, your camera glasses and capture rigs are recording devices. Your avatar and asset platforms are distributors. The law is indeed pointed straight at you. The platform rules kick in 2027, and the device rules phase in January 2028. So here's the gap. What happens between these two laws? One law says put the label on when the content's made. The other says keep the label on when you distribute it. It sounds airtight, but in the middle, something happens. The asset gets built into an avatar, either by narrow or weak AI, which is the traditional way, which is, by the way, how Activision put my face on it. You know, an odd-looking version of my face gets wrapped around a 3D skeleton, right? Or by generative AI, it passes through a rebuilding step. In GAI, it's a neural engine. It comes out the other side, and when it does, the label is gone. Now, I've spent 3 months proving this with audio. You cannot keep a watermark inside content that gets rebuilt by a neural engine. The engine learns the identity of the voice, throws everything else away. It's the same for images, for video, for any asset that goes through that kind of regen. The signal does not survive the trip. So where that leaves us is the law requires the record when it's created, it requires a record when it's distributed, and right in the middle where you actually build the thing, the record dies. And that gap is the problem. It needs to pass through. And surprise, surprise, California SB 1000, Part 3. It's up this year. Senator Josh Becker, it deletes the 1 million size threshold, monthly users, no matter how small. 4 users, you have to label. And because it's an urgency bill, it takes effect the day it passes with no runway. So keep this in mind. This bill is going to pass, which means that you are covered if you create generative AI in your platform. Now, this one is good for performance. It's good for families. It's going to be a challenge to any non-compliance. So let's keep this in mind. This is the identity slide. It gets fast. If your name, your image, voice, or likeness gets used without consent, you can now get an emergency court order to stop it, and the platform has to comply within 2 business days. That is faster than most human review teams on Earth can move when it's at scale. I know that if you have a platform where someone used Kanye West's face and Kanye's team called you and said, hey, this person is using Kanye's face, you could get it down pretty quickly. Now imagine that at scale. So it'll help to have the answer attached to the asset. Moving on to the EU laws. Whoops. Moving on to the EU laws. Europe, I'm going to give you a little more here because it reaches all of you. It sorts artificial intelligence by risk. Okay, the rules we care about, marking synthetic content, disclosing deepfakes, they sit in what they call the transparency tier, and they come into force August 2nd. We remember that date, California. And here's what makes Europe different and tougher because there is no size threshold. So imagine SB 1000 has passed, whether it's 2 million users or 2 million users, and it's extraterritorial too, which means if your content reaches a user in Italy, you're covered, even if you never set foot in Italy. So the 2 easiest way outs are we are too small and we're not in the EU, they both disappear. And the mechanism is the same idea as Cali. A provider of GAI has to mark its output as artificially generated in a machine-readable format, and the law says the mark has to be as robust and reliable as is technically feasible. Runs into the same wall, right? A mark has to survive, and through a neural rebuild, it will not. And the penalty is 15 million euros or 3% of your worldwide revenue, whichever is higher. You may have heard a bigger number, 35 million or 7%. So again, I just said 15 million euros or 3%, but the bigger number is for the truly banned uses of AI, like subliminal or manipulative AI uses, emotional inference at work and schools, biometric categorization of race, religion, etc. And separately, the Digital Services Act puts a duty on the very large platforms to catch unlabeled deepfakes, and that one runs up to 6% of global revenue. All right, let's move on to the No Fakes Act. Back in the US, at a federal level, it's not law yet. It has cleared a Senate committee in June, but it's coming. This was Senator Coons' bill with Senator Tillis, Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee, and Amy Klobuchar. So it is a bipartisan bill. It would create a federal property right of vinyl and would put a liability on platforms that knowingly host an unauthorized digital replica of a real person. An avatar of a real person is a digital replica, even if it's a cartoon, as is the voice. So under this, hosting one without consent becomes a federal matter and the platform is on the hook. The numbers are serious for platforms, the greater of $75K per violation or actual damages. Here's Denmark. This one is an opportunity. I know I've been presenting plenty of sticks, but there is a carrot for compliance. Denmark has proposed changing its copyright law to make your face and voice your own IP, your own intellectual property, something you own, which means license and sell, protected for 50 years after death. And Denmark intends to push this across the whole EU. So this could be good for the metaverse. It turns a verified digital consented human into a tradable asset. And it's the first market anywhere where consented 3D identity has real commercial value, and has, right? Certainly I can sell a sword on an MMORPG. So Denmark can indeed be a carrot if you honor and you allow the commoditization of human identity and you track consent, which we'll talk about. This one actually passed right after the Elvis bill. The Elvis bill in Tennessee, I'd never thought I'd say this, but thank you, country music. It was the first digital identity law of its kind, and this was the second. SAG-AFTRA actually stood on top of this. This one goes after the contracts. For decades, like the deal I signed with Activision, which says that you can use my likeness, voice, movement, or biometrics, and they were specific, and they can use it in any way they want whatsoever. They can put my head on a donkey. I have no legal recourse, and it lasts until the sun burns out. That's no longer legal. So that kind of blanket is now not only unenforceable unless the uses are specifically described or you were properly represented by a lawyer or your union. I'm sorry, and you were properly represented by a lawyer or your union. So that contract will not hold anymore. Every use of a replica now needs a specific verifiable consent record. Whatever deal you sign without a lawyer and informed consent or a union is not enforceable. Somewhere a machine also must read it. All right, here are the two big ones. I put them together because I really wanted to say this out loud. 2.9 billion people, over 35% of the world's population. Chinese labeling laws came into force on September 1st of last year, and it's comprehensive. It requires 2 labels on synthetic content, latent and manifest, including the identity of whoever made it. So note, they have an identity program, and we're still trying to figure out federated and distributed identity in the United States. And for good reason, we do not have a surveillance state. Hopefully, we will not have a surveillance state. Actually, if you've ever seen the Gene Hackman movie, The Conversation, directed by Coppola, we may have one already, but not at the AI level. So the ACLU is part of that conversation of identity. But in China, their cyberspace regulator enforces it, and they can order fixes, fines, shut down a service that's non-compliant. It's already live. It covers images, video, and virtual scenes. India came next early this year. India defines synthetic content in binding law. It requires it to be clearly labeled, and it requires fast takedown of the worst material. Like when I say fast, hours. And if you don't comply, you lose your safe harbor. Let me say that again. If you don't comply, you lose your safe harbor. That is the legal immunity that lets a platform not be liable for what its users post. You'll see that in Section 230 of the Millennium I forgot the acronym for it, in our country. And that gets taken away in India. The whole platform model is exposed if you don't comply. So India tied labeling to the one thing every platform cares about most. And we'll see if Section 230 gets sunsetted in the United States. So with 2.9 bill, you have the global baseline and it will touch your content. So let's take a look at the clock. You pull the US enforcement together, 48 hours to take content down under one upcoming law, 96 hours to cut off a license under SB 942, 2 business days by an individual making a court order under SB 683. Those are the windows. There's at scale, there's no team of humans reviewing content by hand, but that can move that fast. So the way to comply is to have a machine readable record on the asset already. So the answer to who is this and did they consent comes back instantly. Second away with a lookup. So since in some cases this is more about the stockholder than virtue, there are 4 reasons to care. 1, make money. An asset that carries proof of identity and consent is when you can clear, license, and have the person sell or sell for the person. A verified digital human becomes a product. 2 is prevent loss. Hosting unconsented replicas is a liability clock under every regime I just walked through. 3, cover your tush. When the window is 2 days and you need a due diligence record, you can produce instantly and a memo will not save you. Not in India for sure. And finally, protect your IP. Binding identity and provenance to an asset is what makes it defensible against scraping and against the regeneration that strips it. 4 reasons. Every one of them is your bottom line. I'm just looking at my time here. I should be fine. So governizable equals monetizable. Here's a promise on the other side. If a 3D piece of content can be trusted, it can be sold at scale. Platforms can carry verified assets with confidence. They can prove what they're serving. Licensing scales because the terms travel with the asset. So clearing rights is now a lookup instead of a negotiation. A URI, for example, is what we're talking about at COG. And every use leaves a clean, tamper-evident trail that ideally will be court admissible. Trusted content is content on which you can build a real economy globally. So what is actually missing? And I want to talk to you about your own work because you're closer than you think. I took a look at the Universal Manifest. It already travels across worlds, but it already resolves to a live source, which is good. It already carries granular consent of the asset owner. Note, the asset owner, you even wrote down the deepfake risk yourselves in the ethics notes. That was great. But the field it doesn't carry is the consent of the person inside the asset, which is what the laws are about, whether the avatar has the likeness of the owner or someone else. So the avatar ownership change tracks to who owns the avatar. Nothing tracks whether the face inside it agreed. So when the avatar moves from one world to another, the geometry does travel, but the digital identity consent doesn't currently travel at all. And it shouldn't just get glued in there because it can be a complicated affair. So what this requires, oh, by the way, the missing piece is essentially what's more complicated is who's inside it, whether they said yes, what they said yes to, what are the uses and terms and revocation rights, et cetera. And we'll talk about that briefly. So to close the gap, 3 things: shared record format, way to resolve it live, and a current map of the global laws to stay in step in every country as the rules keep changing. And they're changing fast. So 3 pieces. Let me show you the pieces that already exist because you do not have to invent it for nothing. As Maki mentioned at the beginning, I'm part of C2PA, CAI, COG, and now SMPTE, SMPTE, part of the film and TV industry, among others. Think of it like a birth certificate for a digital media file, recording who made it, every edit tool along the way, tamper-proof metadata. Behind it are Adobe, Google, Microsoft, BBC, Reuters, the AP. It can be a sidecar. It can be embedded in the asset. The Content Authenticity Initiative does outreach in the open source side. We at COG were working on the piece who the identity and the assertions. There hadn't been any expression for the who before. So being chair of the COG Consent Task Force, my jam is definitely consent. And together, they answer 2 questions. What happened to the file? Who stands behind it? And what the consent for use is. And this is the machinery at which the laws are all quietly pointing. And this is being built for enforcement, both of digital identity rights and of IP, which is, of course, embattled everywhere now, probably in more trouble than digital identity laws. So, provenance, who, where, when. Under the hood, C2PA is just a standard way of writing this down. Manifest, small structured file, set of JSON assertions. You can have a UUID, unique ID for the asset, the project, the company responsible, mark certain fields as redactable. Flexible container, what you put in it is for the industry to find, including COG assertions. And by the way, entertainment, news, medical, insurance, governance, everyone is going to have different needs and need to pipe in on that. It's put into a manifest in a jump header, for example, on a JPEG, MP3, MPEG dash headers for video, a standard wrapper, a system that speaks the format, can read it and see what's inside. It makes it portable across tools and platforms. That's provenance. Consent is a set of specific questions. What can be done and who can agree to be in it? I mentioned the consent task force on the left. On the right, if you check out consentmatrix.app, that is a very built out version, but this passed the Los Angeles New Technology Committee and the local board in 2024. Basically, 6 questions one would ask a performer. For example, are you going to use my likeness, voice, movement, or biometrics? Check 1. Am I playing a character? Will there be spin-offs? Will there be commercials made? Will there be standalone digital assets? Are you going to make a teddy bear with my voice? Will I be naked? I know it's in our collective bargaining agreements, but say it again in a consent matrix and make it machine readable. And finally, what are the uses, terms, and revocation rights? And that would go in a manifest together with provenance. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room as far as I'm concerned, agentic AI. Now, I've mentioned the first 3. Let's go through this again, just for clarity. This matters far beyond avatars. Everything I've described comes down to one job. A system has to be able to reconcile 3 things at once, right? Identity, is it you? Provenance of the asset, the consent attached. You get that reconciliation right, you've not just solved media, you've solved something much bigger coming at all of us fast. So 5 questions need to be answerable. Who is this? Where did the request come from and when? Did the relevant person consent? Was the agent authorized to do this specific thing? And who's liable if it goes wrong? That one I'd like to underline 4 times. Identity, provenance, consent, authorization, and liability. Those 5. So hold on to these 5, and I'll make them real with a simple story. Right? One of my favorite books growing up was I, Robot, and Asimov really was the first one to talk in sci-fi about AI. And he talked about the positronic brain, which is essentially AI. It can be argued that, when we got to the bicentennial man, there was consciousness. It can be argued whether GAI will ever become conscious because of the way it, quote unquote, thinks. But let's just say I tell my robot to get me, you tell your robot to get you soda, right? So my question is, how do we know you're you? We have to figure out a way to make sure that you're not a deep fake of you or someone who's taking your phone and is pretending to be you. Second of all, we need provenance. Where and when did you ask your robot to please get you a soda? And I hope you said please. Consent. Did you give your robot consent to use your credit card or your debit card or whatever it has in order to buy you a soda? Authorization. Did you tell your robot to wash your clothes? Did you tell it to iron? No, you told it to get you a soda. And finally, who's responsible if your robot smashes through the wall on the way? Is it you? Did you actually tell the robot to smash through the wall? Is it the manufacturer? Or if your robot was repaired last week, where is the cryptographically signed receipt by the repair shop that says what it did and what happened? So the point is, once you have all those together, you can actually have gated agentic action. You have verifiable credentials, you resolve your identity, you capture the metadata about where and when. You figure out the consent, which, depending on the request, i.e., please play me a movie of Robert De Niro doing To Be or Not to Be from Hamlet. Well, probably Robert De Niro gets paid a little bit for that. And if it's in his consented bin, then there you go. Let's say I can do that. To be or not to be, that's the question, right? The authorization tumbler, are they allowed to do that act is there a risk tier assessment done? Because someone is going to have to be liable. I think it's funny that I say this. I think maybe the insurance companies are going to be the saviors of the world, because if they won't insure enterprise companies who don't comply with laws, we will have compliance. So thank you. Thank you for letting me share this. And if you guys have questions, you want to talk about it, I am more than happy to answer what I can. And just know, DMCA, thank you.
Yeah, that's really great presentation, Erik, as usual. The performance and act gave it a lot of flavor as well. So I think, Leonard, if you'd like to go ahead, you also pasted a question in chat. So please go ahead.
So separate from the chat question, when you take a picture out in the public, there are people in the background. Is there any provisions either in support of or against them having any claims to your picture?
Well, it's interesting. In show business, let's say I'm interviewing you on the street, right? Well, I'm hired by the company, so I have a contract. If I interview you, you have to sign something to clear. If a person appears in something, you have to sign something to clear, or legal won't clear. Right, but in terms of life, I can't answer that question. I can only say that if I share a photo and that has you in the background and someone deepfakes you and we can trace it back to you, you may have a claim in court. Otherwise, people can do whatever the heck they want. And the question is, what is done with your image? I hope I answered your question.
No, you just opened up the big possibility of unknown in court cases.
Well, yeah, which is why when we label, it changes things significantly. And by the way, if I take that picture and I label it and I use you improperly, well, that provenance points to me. That's not your fault. You have a claim against me, which is what we want. I want to be able to use your face for anything I want, but everyone else, no. Seriously, it's an important question. And by the way, it's going to be an important question for selfies. I haven't figured that one out yet.
It's just the same sort of question, except now you're taking your own picture, but there could be people in the background.
Right, or if it's you and me and I share it on Instagram, do I have your permission to share your face? And that's really up to platform laws. Greg,
I see a lot of worms.
Yeah, and actually, Greg is the co-architect of the Universal Manifest. I told you about, Erik. He and Alfred worked on that one. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Erik. That was amazing. I'm thrilled. It's great to hear somebody talks about this. I was looking at what you were presenting there. I'm just wondering about the in your 5 tumbler model. What is the minimum record that has to exist before an agent is allowed to act? Do you have any sense of that?
When you say minimum record, what do you mean?
Well, you describe consent.
I see what you mean. Yeah. I see what you mean. I think at the beginning of this slideshow, someone said, we're not going to talk about any patents. So,
okay.
I will say, though, the minimum record is going to be determined by three different parties. Number one, laws. Number two, court cases. And number three, individuals and their behavior. In other words, we already have this. Let me give you an example. If I use my Citi card in a Bank of America ATM on Saturday night, my PIN is worth $200 to Bank of America, right? I put in my PIN, Bank of America goes to Citibank and says, does Erik have enough money for this? Yes, great, here, $200. Now, just note, Citibank and Bank of America aren't going to reconcile that till Monday morning. But we know that Citibank is good for that money, because if they weren't, well, it's a heavily regulated industry, and Citibank would lose its value overnight if they didn't honor their debts. So we already have a situation of gated behavior of giving me cold, hard cash that involves a trust network that has supported us ever since Citibank invented the ATM in the 80s. And I should know, actually, my first day job out of college was designing patent flows for Citibank's electronic monetary system. So I was really, really close to the banking industry. In that. And let me just say one more thing that's quite important. My mentor, Sholem Rosen, talked to me about security. And The two groups that are especially good at it are banks and governments. Three things you need. You need a secure device, you need to detect intrusion, and you need to cordon off intrusion. And the overwhelming philosophy behind security is paranoia. You have to be paranoid. You ever drive a different direction out of your hometown, drive for a couple hours, use your credit card in a gas pump, and it gets cut off because that's not your normal behavior? And your bank goes, "Did you use this in a gas pump?" "Yes, I did." And now you can use your card. That's because the bank is responsible for that money. So the answer to your question is really this already exists, and it really depends on the industry and who wants to gate it. I would say
gotcha.
One more thing. The other thing I'm working on is ethical AI. By ethical AI, every credential has to pass. And it has to pass in flying colors. Otherwise, all the distributed AI around it are going to go, "Wait a second, something didn't match out." And it's that issue will be escalated. An ethical AI system is where a bunch of AIs look at each other because AIs tend to hallucinate. Neil,
so just to follow up. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please.
Just wondering about the when the gatekeeper differs by industry, what should remain standardized so consent and provenance can still travel between industries?
I'm so glad you said that. And that's why I spend hours and hours and hours every week with standards boards. There's ISO. There's a whole bunch of other standards that everybody has to read. There has to be a universal reader. I am one of those who believe that reading a watermark and a manifest should be free for everyone. There should be you remember how we have the universal remote for TVs? There should be one to open any provenance manifest. So if the required information passes, doesn't matter what order they're in because they're read at machine speed. Did you get A, B, C, D, and E? Great. Did you miss D? We need D. We don't have D. Either say no or escalate. But it has to be standard and readable. We can't have a generative AI try to think about it like a human looking at a passport at a gate. It needs to go. And by the way, that can be done with an immediate check of the blockchain.
Yeah, maybe Neil has a question. So Neil is the president of the Metaverse Standards Forum. He's also the vice president for ecosystems at NVIDIA. Neil, please go ahead.
You guys could buy all but 2 sovereign countries on the planet. Good for you, Neil. I hope you're a stockholder.
No, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you. And a number of us on the call are participating in standards organizations that are creating 3D asset formats. So I'd like to kind of focus in on what pragmatic action should we be thinking about to help our part of the problem solution that we can participate in. So I guess 2 questions. When do you think that the various legislative bodies are going to start thinking about 3D watermarking? Because you mentioned at the beginning it's 3D isn't covered yet. And secondly, watermarking, how durable does it have to be? And has anyone in your experience, in your circles, because also you talk to a bunch of folks out there, has anyone figured out how to have a durable watermark and metadata in a 3D asset?
I'm so glad you asked that question. First of all, the law is absolutely 100% covered. It says that if you use a human and it looks or sounds like them, and you do not have their consent, you're covered.
Yes.
If you have less than 1 million users, you're covered until SB 1000 passes, but you're not covered under the EU. One of the things that's actually really good about AI is you just try to pass an asset around that never touches California servers. Good luck with that. Same with the EU, right? There is coverage. Watermarking a 3D asset. Let's talk about that. I'm not an expert on the ins and outs of the coding of the metaverse, but I assume that if I'm on my goggles and I'm rendering out the universe, having played World of Warcraft for a while, so I get it. I'm generating it, but you're actually showing me this avatar. Something is driving this avatar. Whatever sent the avatar there, and whatever's driving this avatar may make it unnecessary to watermark.
Right.
However, that information has to pass through. I would say that one thing is that if I'm recording, then it should be watermarked on my device. That way, when it plays back, we can know this was a simulation, this happened, and here's the information. When it comes to me, we actually have 3 or 4 intermediate steps, all of which can collect that mum format, right, and deliver it. And the other part of your question is, what can you do? You can actually speak to me, and we can really discuss what it means to give granular consent for the use of a digital identity in a metaverse situation, where the pitfalls are, where the money is, and above all, really how to comply with laws across all companies.
Yeah.
I hope that answered your questions.
Yeah, no, it's helpful. I have a bunch more questions, but yes, no, thank you for the offer of engaging. That's
of
fantastic.
Course, let's talk further if you like. Yes, Mike.
Yeah. Hey, Eric, thanks. Love the presentation and really interesting. I wanted to maybe switch gears or switch the topic a little bit from human identity, which seems pretty clear. It's coming, it's here. We have to protect human identity. But what about like physical objects and like digital scans, like replicas? Like if you use photogrammetry to create a copy of something, how is that going to be, enforced? Like I assume if we come up with the mechanisms for the metadata, we could apply it the same. But it may be a little murky, like who owns a specific copyright, especially if it's something historical, right? If there's a historical church in a village and you want to show it in, Google Earth, is Google going to need to get permission from someone in the chain to show that? Or is there an idea of like kind of publicly accessible, non-copyrightable things that have been around for so long that there's no more digital trademark? I'm just kind of curious how it applies, especially as we do a lot of work in e-commerce and usually on behalf of a client that owns the trademark. But as that kind of evolves, I wonder how much the law is going to focus on the copyright versus the human identity part of the problem.
Boy, honestly, I could speak for an hour on the copyright side of it. One of the things, Denmark is able to equate IP with digital identity, but the goalposts keep moving in the United States, right? We have AB 412 in California. I was part of getting 180 people to testify for that IP bill, which basically says that if you ingest copyrighted material into an AI, you actually have to have a manifest of what you've ingested and make it fingerprintable. So that's the first part of it. Let's start with the basis is that all the major LLMs stole everything, right? That's the original sin of AI.
Kind of out of the bag, though. Yeah.
and now we're a $27 trillion industry, and just make us delete it, right? That's the whole side of it. So, and the studios, by the way, I have an article on how you can't take Bugs Bunny out of Midjourney. Can't be done. If I say black and white 50s cartoon gray rabbit eating a carrot, you're going to get Bugs Bunny. If you say standing with black duck hunting season, you know what you're going to get. So, and by the way, if I say cartoon mouse, 1 out of 4 is Mickey. So at this point, identity becomes a serious issue. What I care about is this, and I call it bypassing the tunnel, Mike. We have provenance on something. It disappears in the black box. The black box puts it. Put the provenance on it, right? So, and in terms of what's protected, we already cover that with Creative Commons licenses. The thing is, Google is able to look, this is Creative Commons and this isn't. I don't know how accurate that is, but once everything's labeled, we will. And I do want to approach a point. I know I'm speaking quickly, but I know we're running out of time, and I don't want to miss many people. But I will say this: it is entirely possible to watermark and put headers on everything that's already been done. It's called a cron job. Nobody can tell me Google and on its servers on YouTube couldn't in a week have every single piece of its media properly watermarked and consented going forward, but also at least watermark what's in the past, such that if that face gets used, we know exactly where we got it in the pipeline. And by the way, I think it's going to be important because, and I've spoken with legislative staff directly about this. What if 50 local mayors go on broadcast saying that they're active shooters in their local schools as a precursor to a major cyber attack? And Dean Ball, who wrote the AI action plan, said, well, that's a probable scenario. I'm like, dude, yeah. We have to label everything, and we have to check if it has provenance and consent. So this goes to the real world, as was discussed, and it also goes to the virtual world. Now, the real world is the replicant world, and I don't know how far away we are from robots appearing as humans. But for now, if I see you in IRL, I know you're real. Time.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, guys, no worries. We can take it, to recorded water cooler so that, if there's more questions, just feel free to ask. I think also Alfred with us, Amanda, they're pretty interested in those topics like the California and EU AI Act. So please feel free to raise any questions.
Yeah, I have until 12:30 my time. So Neil, if you do want to ask more questions as well, however you want to work it.
Sure. I do have more questions if you have time. Thank you for staying on for a few minutes. So, I mean, what you were saying, I think, kind of maybe increased my understanding a little bit. I understand that a lot of the protections and the legislation is based around the human identity, which for all the reasons that you were very eloquent about. So I guess a question, just to make sure I really understand. So for the legislation that is currently coming into play in the 2nd of August, for videos and images
and audio too,
yeah. Does that have to include human likeness, or is that covering every piece of assets?
Totally separate conversation.
Yes, right.
Generative AI declaration and digital identity are two separate sets of laws.
Yes, that's what you helped me understand.
The digital identity laws have kicked in.
Yes, no, I understand. Yes, I understand
the No Fakes Act, I don't know when it's going to go into effect, but that's going to probably pass soon. It's a very interesting time.
Yes.
I got to tell you, someone used Mythos to crack into US servers a couple months ago. And finally, everyone, including legislators, is willing to go, okay, maybe there is an existential risk. Just so you know, I know there are people that are on different spectrums. I've been following AI since I was programming with Lisp as a kid. I just kind of want to go, and so I've read all of Kurzweil's stuff. So I'm a heaven scenario sort of person, but our current trajectory, I'm a 99% hell scenario sort of person. And it's really nice to know that Marsha Blackburn, Josh Hawley, and others are creating these huge omnibus bills that will probably get divided into 100 pieces and going, okay, we have too many state laws. We're going to try to preempt, but that isn't working. I think, by the way, let me just add to the top of that. I think there may be a catastrophic AI event that will wake people up. Hopefully, no one is going to get hurt badly. But historically, our country has waited for Pearl Harbor and 9/11 and COVID to really do anything. And when you have 320 million people going, turn off the internet, and industry going, don't do that, then we'll have real conversations.
Yes. Humans are terrible, undefined big risks in the future.
So I believe we're early, which makes me sometimes feel like Chicken Little or Cassandra. At the same time, I'm working so hard such that if and when a catastrophic event happens, I'm like, here's a safety net. Here's a plan for the federal government. I'm working with other people to put together, an action plan called Project Meridian to handle that exact problem. And by the way, it's kind of the metaverse. You just can't see it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I see Leonard's hands, but just to kind of maybe just loop back. So from the nuts and bolts 3D asset standards point of view, the fact that all of this is about to go, I mean, obviously the human likeness stuff is super important, but if everything is going to have to be durably watermarked, that's actually kind of the larger problem from the nuts and bolts of how do we define a 3D asset. And it's
durably watermarked is this. I tell it to watermark it because I have a watermarking module, and this is what you put in it. A lot of people are thinking it's going to take all that much work. Well, in order to put any metadata in it, I mean, you guys have metadata in it, right? It's literally another step, and at machine speed, it doesn't really take that long to watermark an asset. And it doesn't really take that long to store to store data at an external URI that holds any metadata you want. I mean, that's how you can monetize. That's how you can use NFTs finally in a semi-silo. By the way, the reason DRM and NFTs had so much problem is because out in the wild, people, the first thing they want to do is try to hack it, right? The first groups to succeed at this were Netflix and iTunes and Spotify because they siloed their DRM. So the question is, how do we silo it within the metaverse and make it able to go from metaverse to metaverse, and yet make sure that you're not attacking it from the outside? That's to have an external reference URI that holds all your data. And if you can't reference it, you don't play the data.
Yes. Okay. No, that's interesting. I mean, yes. I mean, we have the capability to put metadata into assets, and the ontology is interesting. But C2PA has ontologies, right? That we could just use, right?
Yeah. What's really nice about C2PA, and the reason I was interested, is because there is actually data saying, hey, this was created this time, et cetera. It's like all standardized. A bunch of fellow data nerds, or we're all sitting there going, how do we express in the way? I was just on a SMPTE board where we're discussing how do we express universal time on an asset so it's always local time? Because you have the whole globe. Do you use UTC, GMT? How are we going to express it? That's so that it's readable. And the good news is, Neil, I think your processes are fast enough to handle it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Today.
And there's, yeah. So that's solvable. That's definitely solvable. And then you're saying maybe the blockchain, rather than trying to make the asset itself completely bulletproof, maybe the blockchain, the DRM approach is a better way. Yeah.
Well, here's how it works for me, and this is what I've been talking about in the consent. Like in my business, I book a commercial. I book, I don't know, a Jeep commercial, the voice of the Jeep, and it's for 6 months, network run. Cable, if such thing still exists, and streaming. At about 5.5 months, I get a call from my agent say they want to extend another 6 months, and I say yes. So I get a piece of paperwork, I sign it, cha-ching, but they now have my permission to extend it. If I put that consent on the asset, it's not changeable. If I put it at the URI, then we just say the new one supersedes the old one, and we have a date to compare it to. Everything else stays the same. Everything else stays the same.
Yeah.
So consent, for example, will vary. If Taylor Swift says, I don't want to be on Spotify anymore, they just change a variable.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. Leonard, go ahead.
I had wondering on a technical side, because Neil's addressing some of the procedural stuff. If in normal processing, you take an image which has all the necessary, essentially, paperwork to justify its existence, and you do something like a compression where you get it down to such a low rate that you corrupt the indelible trademarks, what happens?
What happens is, if it's my world, I don't play it. I'm like, put it back on. Put the trademarks back on. You're the one who compressed it. Stick it back on and take responsibility by saying, I stuck it back on this date and time. I mean, it makes sense to bridge that gap. If you don't bridge that gap, here's where we are. I can tell you if it's real, but I can't tell you if it's not. Let me tell you a little story that's related. I spoke at the annual fraud conference this year. Insurance. I was in a room full of DAs and law enforcement and special investigation unit and insurance adjusters whose job it is to detect fraud. So I put 4 pictures on the screen of 4 different car accidents. This is what they look at all day. And I said, which is real, which is AI? And I shuffled through them. And at the end of it, I said, okay, what do you guys think? This one's real, this one's AI. I said, actually, they're all real. I told you guys I'm a bad driver. They couldn't tell the difference. So the thing is, I can't tell by looking at it whether it's real or AI. We no longer can. So the proof has to be in the system, not on the asset. If you lose the metadata, we need it in order to show it, ideally, or we can't trust it. We can't trust it. Now, the systems are not in place. The laws are in place. The systems are trying to approach that.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about the KDB. Do you have an idea of when the systems are collectively will mostly get there?
Yeah, I do. I think that there are 2 possibilities. Actually 3. If our federal government decides that they are really serious about this, then they're going to create a network, a federated network, what they call a registry of registries. And they're going to be able to move forward with industry. If I'm in the insurance industry and I want to tag a photo of a car, I'm going to put the claimant, the claim number, all this other stuff, who the adjuster is, right? If I'm a doctor, I'm going to put the patient, the time they checked into hospital, the diagnosis code, the radiologist, et cetera, for that X-ray. Every industry is going to have to pipe in. The question is, what's the liability, and how long is the liability going to last? And at what point do the lawsuits exceed the ability to be insured? Or the third option is there's going to be a catastrophic event where everyone goes, oh my God. And I will say, in relation to that, Leonard, if I leave my door open, if I'm out of town, I leave my door open and someone steals my TV, all of a sudden the whole neighborhood knows my door is open. So the question is, when are bad people going to start doing bad things with this AI, especially bad state actors, once they know where the vulnerabilities are? And they're powered by Mythos class AI, which, by the way, from what I just learned from a legislative group in Washington, the open models are going to have that in 6 months. So, like, hurry up. The good news is I and my team have solved some of that. It's just a question of the will. And I think in a corporate world, the will is make us, right? You know, the four things: make money, don't lose money, cover our butts, and protect our IP. If it can touch one of those four, it'll happen.
Okay.
I know we're early.
Yeah. Yeah, about 6 months.
Yeah. Well, it's better that than 6 years. 6 years, you starve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, thank
Greg.
you. Greg.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you, Leonard. Yeah, last question. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, just real quick. So if consent lives on a URI because it can change, what should 3D standards define so the runtimes know they are reading the current consent record?
Good question. I would say what you need is a system that governs. Now, first of all, you need a system that gets identity. You need a system that governs. You need a system that creates receipts. And you need a system that not only creates the metadata on the asset, but can read it. Once you have all of those, you can handle anything at runtime. The question is simply building it, and it's 100% software, and can be done with an API or an SDK eventually, or it can be done as a standalone app locally, depending on how you want to do it in an enterprise throughput. Think about it: if everyone in audio is using Pro Tools, everybody can, share the same tools.
Yeah, I've been thinking about a runtime behavior with a cache and refresh and a deny escalate if the URI can't be resolved.
Well, you can also set a time. This one I will let out. Like you said, let's say, like, look, yeah, I'll drive it for 3 seconds, but if it didn't reconcile in 3 seconds, yeah, your wizard is probably going to die in the swamp of the dread between the tree and the wizard's house. And it didn't authenticate because you're using someone's face without consent. You had 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you don't have internet access, you're not playing an MMORPG anyway.
Yeah, and you're not connected to the metaverse.
Right. I mean, locally on my machine, aside from certain content, i.e., stuff that makes a person a traitor or the wrong kind of pornography, you can have anything on your machine. Once it goes out there, you're even crossing state lines and international lines. So interesting conversation, especially, I've been talking with the customs people. Like, once you cross, international lines with pornography, the rules get weird. How many countries did that appear in? Singapore, China, India? You're going to have to face them all. But the thing is, people aren't getting caught because there's no provenance or consent on things. Guys, I do have to run. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Erik.
Thank you.